Jamie's Crying by Van Halen here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
We turn now to a controversial trade pact between the United States and 8 Pacific nations that until now has remained largely secret. It's called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP. A chapter from the draft agreement leaked Wednesday outlines how it would allow foreign corporations operating in the United States to appeal key regulations to an international tribunal. The body would have the power to override U.S. law and issue penalties for failure to comply with its rulings. The agreement is being negotiated by the U.S. Trade Representative Ron Kirk, appointed by President Obama, but the newly revealed terms contradict promises Obama made while running for president in 2008. One campaign document read in part, quote, "We will not negotiate bilateral trade agreements that stop the government from protecting the environment, food, safety, or the health of its citizens, or give greater rights to foreign investors than to U.S. investors."
Earlier leaks from the draft Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement exposed how it included rules that could increase the cost of medication and make participating countries adopt restrictive copyright measures. No one from the U.S. Trade Representative's office was able to join us, but in a statement to Democracy Now!, they said, quote, "Nothing in our TPP investment proposal could impair our government's ability to pursue legitimate, non-discriminatory public interest regulation." For more, we're joined by Lori Wallach, director of the Fair Trade Group Public Citizens Global Trade Watch. The leaked documents were posted on her organization's website early Wednesday morning. Lori, welcome to Democracy Now! Explain what the documents show and what this agreement is about.
Well, it's been branded as a trade agreement, but really it is enforceable corporate global governance. The agreement requires that every signatory country conform all of its laws, regulations, and administrative procedures to what are 26 chapters of very comprehensive rules, only 2 of which have anything to do with trade. The other 24 chapters set a whole array of corporate new privileges and rights and handcuff governments, limit regulation. So the chapter that leaked, and it's actually on the website of Citizens Trade Campaign, it's a national coalition for fair trade, that chapter is the chapter that sets up new rights and privileges for foreign investors, including their right to privately enforce this public treaty by suing our government, raiding our treasury, over costs of complying with the same policies that all U.S. companies have to comply with. It's really outrageous.
Well, Lori, there's been quite a bit of complaint, even in Congress, about the secretive nature of these continuing negotiations. About 600 or so corporate advisors have access to information that even members of Congress don't. Could you talk about how that has come about?
Well, this is how you get a text and in a potential agreement that is this outrageous. I mean, this isn't just a bad trade agreement. This is a 1%er power tool that could rip up our basic needs and rights. How that happens is the negotiations have been done in total secrecy. So for 2.5 years, until this leak emerged, people have suspected what's going on because, as you said, under U.S. law, there are 600 official advisors. They have security clearance to see the text. They advise the U.S. position. Meanwhile, the Senator, Ron Wyden, who is the chairman of the Trade Committee in the Senate, the committee with jurisdiction over the TPP, has been denied access to the text, as has his staff, who has security clearance, to a point where this man, who has supported agreements like this in the past, has filed legislation demanding he have the right to see the agreement that he's supposed to be having oversight with. He's on the Intelligence Committee, and he has security clearance. So he can see our nuclear secrets. He just can't see this corporate Bill of Rights that is trying to be slipped into effect in the name of being a trade agreement. It's a very elegant Trojan horse strategy. You brand it one thing, and then you put an agenda that could not survive sunshine into this agreement. We have been able also to get some of the texts on patents, expanding patents for big pharma, jacking up medicine prices. And we have analysis on our website, tradewatch.org, as well as information about how to get involved. Because These agreements are a little bit like Dracula. You drag them in the sunshine and they do not fare well. But all of us, and also across all of the countries involved, there are citizen movements that are basically saying, this is not in our name. We don't need global enforceable corporate rights. We need more democracy. We need more accountability.
Lori,
and this agreement's the antithesis.
I want to read part of the comment we got from the U.S. Trade Representative's office when we invited them on today's show. They wrote, quote, the Obama administration's infused unprecedented transparency into the TPP negotiations. We've worked with members of Congress and invited stakeholders to every round of negotiations where they've given presentations and met with individual negotiating teams. We're always looking for ways to enhance provisions on transparency and public participation. Lori Wallach, your comment.
Well, to start with, the idea of transparency of the current negotiators is a one-way mirror. We can basically talk to them and do presentations. But as this leak shows, nothing that the public interest organizations, and it's a huge array of organizations from faith groups to consumer groups, environmental, labor, nothing that we have said is now reflected in the U.S. position in this negotiation, which I'm sad to say is the most extreme. I mean, the U.S. is even opposing proposals in this agreement to try and make sure countries have the ability to use financial regulation to ensure financial stability. The U.S. positions don't reflect what we've been saying, but we can talk at them. But just to put this in perspective, in the last negotiation of a big regional agreement, that was the Free Trade Area of the Americas in the 1990s, 34 countries, very complicated agreement. 2 years into the negotiation, the entire draft text was published officially by the governments. Here we are 3 years into this negotiation with 8 countries, and they will not publish a sentence. In fact, it finally leaked that they had signed a special agreement not to release any draft text for 4 years after negotiations are done, a secrecy agreement on top of the normal secrecy. And when asked, Ron Kirk, the trade representative, why, in the past the U.S. has sent out draft text, the WTO, hardly a paradigm of transparency, publishes draft text. What's going on, he was asked. He said, well, in the past, for instance, the Free Trade Area of the Americas, when the text was revealed, we couldn't finish it. Now, what sort of indictment is that of what they are doing behind closed doors? That merely allowing the public who will live with the results and Congress to know what's up is going to somehow derail the plans to lock us in. Because what's really important to understand about these agreements, it's not about trade, and it's like cement. Once the cement dries in these agreements, you can't change the rules unless all the other countries agree to amend the agreement. So what we're talking about with this leaked chapter is literally a parallel system of justice. People have domestic laws in courts trying to defend our rights and get our needs met. Corporations would have a parallel system of private attorneys, 3 of them, no conflict of interest laws. The U.S. and the other countries would submit themselves to the jurisdiction of this corporate kangaroo court. And these 3 random attorneys would have the right to order the U.S. government to pay unlimited amounts of our tax dollars to corporations and investors who, A, claim regulatory costs need to be refunded, or B, are saying they're not being treated well enough, regardless if the policies they dislike are the exact same ones that apply to all of us. Even under NAFTA's system, which has some of this, $350 million have already been paid out to corporations by governments over toxics bans, zoning laws, timber rules. This is a sneaky outrage, and if people actually put a spotlight on it, we can stop it.
So, Lori, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned the 8 nations that are involved in the negotiations. Which nations are they? And also the issue of the way this is being negotiated, the number could expand dramatically in the future. Could you talk about that?
Well, the reason why it is so incredibly important that this agreement be exposed is this could well be the last agreement that's negotiated. So many of your listeners and viewers have been involved in the sneaky way trade agreements have been used by corporations to limit regulation and to foster a race to the bottom since NAFTA. And each of these agreements has gotten bolder, more expansive in its limits on government regulation and its granting of corporate powers. This one could be the end, because what they intend to do is leave it open once it's done, for any other country to join. So this is an agreement that ultimately could have the whole world in it as a set of binding corporate guarantees of new rights and privileges enforced with cash sanctions and trade sanctions. It is not an exaggeration to say that the TPP threatens to become a regime of binding global governance, right at the time that the Occupy movement and movements around the world are demanding more power and control. This is the fight back. This is locking in the bad old way plus. And in addition, the way that the agreement is being negotiated, these rules would require that you not only change all of your existing laws, so good progressive laws would have to be gotten rid of, but that in the future you don't create new laws. Now, the agreement now includes Australia, Brunei, New Zealand, Singapore, Chile, Peru, and Vietnam, as well as the U.S., plus Malaysia has now joined. And the agreement includes all of the NAFTA-style privileges that promote offshoring, but more drastically, it has all sorts of new corporate privileges. So the right to extend medicine and seed monopolies to jack up medicine prices, even the right to challenge formularies, medicine prescription group buying plans, for instance, what the Obama administration has put in their health reform bill. They are at the negotiating table behind closed doors trying to kill the right to use for other countries. Or the financial rules would have just a limit. Countries aren't allowed to ban risky financial products or services at the same time that we're trying to issue regulations under financial reform. And the agreement even meddles with how we spend our local tax dollars. For folks around the country who are doing sweat-free campaigns, who are doing living wage campaigns, green buying campaigns, this agreement says, A, you can't have local preferences, so no Buy New York State preference to recycle money back in your state, your tax dollars, no Buy American, but also conditions like a product has to have recycled content or that uniform has to be sweat-free. Those kind of conditions can be challenged. It is an incredible corporate power tool. It's only gotten this far because it's been secret. And people in the other countries don't want it either. But our government is the one that's largely pushing the most radical provisions, which is why it was so important for this text, which everyone can see an analysis of at tradewatch.org, to be made public, to make people aware of what's really going on.
Lori, the last round of negotiations on the trade agreement took place in Dallas. While there, Obama's appointed trade representative, Ron Kirk, spoke at an event for the local business community. The Yes Men took the opportunity to present Kirk, the former mayor of Dallas, with a mock award. This is a clip.
Hello, thank you so much for being here. My name is Git Habersall, and on behalf of the Texas Corporate Power Partnership, we are very, very pleased to announce that the U.S. trade negotiators are the winners of our 2012 Corporate Power Tool Award. We would like to personally thank the negotiators for their relentless efforts. The TPP agreement is shaping up to be a great way for us to maximize our profits, regardless of what the public of this nation or any other nation thinks is right.
The next round of negotiations on TPP are scheduled over the July 4th holiday weekend. Lori Wallach, can you comment on this? And also what I assume would be President Obama's response, if talking behind the scenes, like perhaps tonight when he's going to be at Sarah Jessica Parker's house with raising a lot of money. The financial sector is donating $37 million to Mitt Romney so far. The Obama administration's haul, $4.8 million. That even his own Wall Street supporters are going over to Romney right now. So he would say he is doing better than Romney would in trying to take on these guys.
I think that for President Obama, there are two scenarios. One is he has not been on top of what these negotiators are doing. This really has been under the radar. It's so important that the text finally came out because it sends a warning to Congress, to the public, et cetera. And that's basically he's got negotiators on the loose. They are many of the same people who during the Clinton administration got us into NAFTA. They're recycled back into the trade negotiating team. The other alternative explanation is just the money one, which is it is the case that this is an agreement the 1% loves. This is sort of a 1%er fantasy. It's not just that on the margins and in national governments you have to keep fighting with all your money and lobbying to try and get what you want. This would lock it in for the future, indefinitely.
We want to thank you very much for being with us, Director of Public Citizens Global Trade Watch, and we will continue to watch this. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, whistleblower Jesselyn Radack on what a number in Congress are calling national security leaks. Stay with us. Human qualities. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
A bipartisan dispute has emerged on Capitol Hill over how to investigate a series of national security leaks, including disclosures about President Obama's secret kill list, as well as the U.S.-Israeli use of cyber weapons to target Iran's nuclear program. Details of both stories appeared in the New York Times. Attorney General Eric Holder has appointed 2 prosecutors to head a probe into the leaks, but Republicans have criticized him for refusing to appoint an independent special counsel. This is Republican Senator John McCain of Arizona.
Here we are with a very serious breach of national security, in the view of some, the most serious in recent history, and it clearly cries out for the appointment of a special counsel. It obviously is one of the highest breaches of security that this country has ever seen.
Meanwhile, Democrats have rejected such calls, saying the 2 U.S. attorneys that Holder appointed last week will operate independently and fairly. On Friday, President Obama rejected suggestions the leaks may have come from his administration to bolster his re-election bid.
The notion that my White House would purposely release classified national security information is offensive. It's wrong, and people, I think, need to have a better sense of how I approach this office and how the people around me here approach this office.
Well, for more, we go now to Washington, D.C., where we're joined by Jesselyn Radack, former ethics advisor to the U.S. Department of Justice, currently the Director of National Security and Human Rights at the Government Accountability Project, the nation's leading whistleblower organization. Her book is called Traitor, the Whistleblower in the American Taliban. Jesselyn Radack, welcome to Democracy Now! Talk about the significance of these calls for an investigation into security leaks. What are the leaks, and what is motivating the calls?
Well, I think an election year is motivating the calls for investigation. I think the leaks that we're talking about deal with everything from the Osama bin Laden raid to information and operational details about a virus to killing an American, al-Awlaki, a number of extremely high-level leaks of classified information, which include sources and methods, has hit the front pages of major newspapers in this country. Yet the administration has been engaged in a brutal crackdown on so-called leakers who, more often than not, are whistleblowers over the past 2 years. So while I am gratified that Congress is finally paying attention to the hypocrisy of that course of action, that being the government leaking like a sieve while going after people who've actually made legitimate disclosures of fraud, waste, abuse, and illegality, I don't know if having more leak prosecutions is really the right answer here.
Now, back in 2000, there was an attempt to pass legislation in Congress about leaking. Could you talk about the dangers at that time and the decision of President Clinton to veto that legislation? Absolutely.
Back in 2000, Congress did debate behind closed doors and passed by a voice vote broad anti-leak legislation that would criminalize the leaking of any classified information. And at the time, President Clinton wisely vetoed that because, in President Clinton's words, it would unnecessarily chill legitimate activity at the heart of a democracy. Now, fast forward ahead, and the only thing between 2000 and today is 9/11. And I don't think we should let 9/11 take away what's at the heart of a free and democratic society. I also think that all these leak investigations, I mean, the answer is not to have even more leak investigations. The answer is to take a serious look at what the administration discloses, both good and bad, which should be out there for public debate.
Republican Congressmember Mike Rogers of Michigan, the House Intelligence Committee chair, said it was not yet known who's behind the recent leaks, but that someone, quote, committed a crime that's having serious consequences to our national security.
Suggesting that the agencies were directed to expand the scope of classified information they gave to the press. We know in some cases someone from a segment of the media was present in a classified setting. Recently, a group of intelligence officers, as I said before, has disclosed directly how many of the leaks over a period of years have made their jobs more difficult in their liaison relationships and their ability to interact with sources and assets around the world who are doing great things for their own countries and the United States as well.
That's Republican Congressmember Mike Rogers of Michigan, head of House Intelligence Committee. Jesselyn Radack, the difference between politically motivated leaks and whistleblowing, the Republicans seem to be most concerned that these leaks are making President Obama look too good.
Yeah, I think the leaks, the quote, authorized leaks, which is an oxymoron, are being done for political gain. Obviously, we don't need to know, and whether it's the newspaper or Hollywood, the sources and methods about the raid of Osama bin Laden. We do need to know about the policy behind the kill list and the assassination of Americans. I agree with Congress that the executive branch leaks that are being done right now are for political gain, and that's wrong. What I'm concerned about, though, is that we could end up with a really bad anti-leaks law that ends up chilling discussion and ends up being used primarily against whistleblowers. I'm afraid that that could be the unintended consequence of all these investigations, which in the end, I'm not hopeful will really lead to any kind of accountability for anybody.
But, Justin Radack, isn't it a structural issue that the more our government relies on secret operations, on that therefore the realm of possible things that could be leaked grows just by the very nature of a move to greater authoritarianism in government activity, so that in essence you are creating a problem that you then want to criminalize people for opposing?
Well, that is an excellent point, and another reason that passing a broad anti-leak law would be so dangerous. Obviously, under the Bush administration, overclassification was a huge problem. But during Obama's first year in office, classification increased by 40%. He classified 77 million more documents in his first year, making it even more likely that people could leak or disclose classified information. And I think the real issue here is a failure to distinguish between classified information that has not been properly classified, that is being used to hide illegality, mistakes, or embarrassment by the administration, versus leaks that are really whistleblower disclosures of fraud, waste, and abuse and illegality, which are protected by the Whistleblower Protection Act. And so far, only that latter category has been subject to prosecution. But again, while there is a hunger for just desserts in seeing the administration called out on leaking like a sieve for its own gain, I'm worried about the long-term unintended consequences that Congress could end up passing a really bad anti-leak measure that I think in this administration that Obama would sign.
Jocelyn Radack, I want to thank you for being with us, former ethics advisor to the U.S. Department of Justice, currently the Director of National Security and Human Rights at the Government Accountability Project. Her new book is called Traitor, the Whistleblower and the American Taliban. That does it for our broadcast. If you want to get a copy, go to our website at democracynow.org. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke, Renee Felsar-Amante, Nermin Sheikh, Steve Martinez, Sanal Kafani, Masood Rabi, Karen Dina Guzder, Chantal Berman, Amy Littlefield, Mike DeFilippo, Miguel Noguera, engineer. Special thanks to Becca Staley, Julie Krause.